welcome back. This is Laura Jane here with George Castro. George, you want to say hello?
Hi, everybody.
We're back with our offering here for parents, primarily, I guess, but really with our interest in feeding family life and offering some ideas and approaches that may be a little bit different than our traditional, usual things we've all heard and even tried. And, just offering, I guess, a space and a place for us all to focus on how we're handling parenting and children and partnership and life and how we might make it more about connection. I think that's our one central theme probably that we encourage. So we're really glad to be back. And so far we've been calling this choices, connection, and consequences, which we have fun playing with how those words come up in the various things that come up when we talk about families. So we thought today it would be really interesting, powerful and appropriate for us to talk about some of how we can handle things like what we get in the news and the world these days with just in the last 24 hours, I think it was, there was the announcement with the explosion at the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester. And so, yes, taking this as an opportunity for us with George being a licensed marriage and family therapist with 25 years of experience working with children and families through all sorts of things, but especially a lot of expertise in how to handle and help and heal trauma when it comes up in our lives on various levels. And for me to get a chance to share what might come through as a yoga therapist and someone interested in how we can be caring for ourselves and responding to what life is bringing us with some of the tools from and maybe practices and ways from yoga and meditation. So, but I know, so I really want to start with making sure we have plenty of time for George to share what he's feeling ready to share in just like how do we help ourselves and our kids in working with this kind of news and how it might affect us in our feelings and in our households and in our thoughts about going back out into the world. So, George, let's turn it right over to you so you can start to share what you want to share.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually become all too common, but just first of all, thoughts and prayers go out to the families and friends of, the bombing in Manchester, England. It's just something that has become so common and, it's devastating and it's very troubling and upsetting, and obviously it causes a lot of stress for our children and for the families. And it's very real, and I think that it's something that has been, we've been dealing with it, since 9/11, and it's something that we can actually take steps to do things that may help to alleviate some of the stress or anxiety that our children may be feeling right now, and not just the kids, but the adults too, because we're equally as affected by all that we see in the news and hear on social media. And so I think this is a really an appropriate forum to talk about some of those things and address them.
Yeah, so do you want to move towards, what some of you think? Go ahead.
So, I mean, like you said, so I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I dealt with this originally after 9/11, but we have continued to deal with it with school shootings and such. So it's actually something that the schools have instituted. Many schools are actually prepared for this in the sense that they're training their people, their teachers, and I actually had a training by a woman named Marlene Wong, PhD, and it was an amazing training. Trying to think if I can remember the name. I actually looked for some of the paperwork on it, and she gives us simple things that we can do that can actually help in the event of something like this. And you can, Google her later, and you can find information about this. She has a website where she has a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. But she basically does a training that's based on what is called psychological first aid. And it's a concept that was first put in practice in 1954 by the American Psychiatric Association. And she has just basically expanded upon that. And so she actually has, I believe it's 4 steps. And this is something that we as parents and, paraprofessionals and teachers and anyone that has any contact with children can actually do. It's not something that, you have to be a licensed professional to work with these kids. And I think, so she calls it, it's called Listen, Protect, Connect. So I thought you'd like the connect part because we're all about connection. So the first step that she talks about, and I could just kind of feed this to you and you can kind of give me your thoughts and opinions on it. But the first step, she says, is to listen. So she says, convey your interest and empathy. And she says to allow and encourage clients to share experiences and express feelings of fear or concern about their safety. So, this happened, or this did happen yesterday, we might ask the first question. I'm going to use my daughter as an example because she was actually away from me at the time. She was at a friend's house. So when I finally did see her, and she's sitting there, I did ask her, hey, did you hear about the concert, this, that, and the other thing? And so you kind of want to just give them a chance to talk. So by bringing it up, which is something that sometimes we think we shouldn't do, we actually think maybe, not talking about it or something is the best answer, but we want to actually bring it up. She gives another bullet point of respond with support to verbal and nonverbal cues, and and she uses client because she's a therapist, give clients extra reassurance and encouragement to return and stay in school or in the stay in school or in their home placement. And then lastly, she has a bullet point that says validate the client's life experience. She has sample listen questions. She has 2, which, where were you when this happened, when this crisis happened? And what do you remember about that day? She actually has a caution, and this is something that, I wanted to bring up. She says not to probe for more details than our children are willing to share. So, to go into details and say, well, did you know this, or this happened, and this happened. So the whole idea is just to listen, just to let them speak, because we don't want to make them feel any more anxiety or re-traumatize someone who was traumatized. We just want to get their story, let them talk about whatever, because they may know very little about it, or they may know a lot. They may have already seen it on the news, that sort of thing. So that's that
seems like an important distinction, and not to probe. So that means if they kind of describe some of these things, that maybe at some point, though, probing, really pushing for, are you sure you're okay, or something like that, maybe not helpful or something. And this also reminds me of that series that we've all been, watching, the one about the 13 Reasons Why, because what was so striking to me in that, so what's so striking to me in that show and interesting, and so maybe we can get into this in a future episode, but is just how all the parents are really trying to check in on their kids. All the parents in that show most of them are seeming great, quote-unquote parents who are really trying to check in on their kids and see if they're okay. Even the young girl who killed herself, her parents, as they portray it, they seemed like they thought they were really connected with their daughter, and they thought they were doing everything they could to stay in tune with how she was doing. But yet in all these situations when the parents would sit down and have this kind of conversation with their kid, like, are you doing okay? Like after their friend had committed suicide, every single one of them, even my daughter Casey pointed this out to me, every single one, the kid would lie to their parents and say they were okay, even if they knew they weren't.
Right.
And so I was like, how do we avoid that? Like even a parent who's trying to check in on them, so that I think may be a good piece, like, because if we probe, or maybe if we act worried or something, I don't know, it's going to actually, it might shut them down and make them think they don't actually want to tell us how they're doing for various reasons, maybe because they want to protect us from how they're really feeling, or maybe they're, so that seems really, an important piece, to be ready to just listen, to not download more information about it, because that probably isn't going to be helpful unless they ask, and then to also don't probe. So listening is different than probing. So, okay, that's really distinguished.
Yeah, and it's really tough to do because we want to make sure our kids are okay. We want to make sure that, and I think the other thing I would say is that when we do talk about it, that we talk about it in a manner that is age appropriate. So obviously you're not going to go into a lot of detail if you are talking about it at all. You want to explain things in terms that kids can understand for their age. If you have a teen, it's going to be very different than how you talk to a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old. Because they may have questions and they may actually talk about it. But at that first point, you just want to listen. So you want to check in with them and you want to listen. And so after that, the second step she has is to protect. So, and I'll just read from this because I have these notes from her talk, and you can get these. Actually, she has them on the website, so I'll give that before we go today. But she talks about reestablishing a sense of safety, emotional as well as physical safety. So, and this was written, like I said, she worked with LAUSD, she worked with DCFS, she's worked with the White House. Like, she's like an expert on this, and this is something that, so some of this, I'm going to read it. It may or may not apply directly to you, but the points that she makes do apply. So she says to honestly inform clients about events surrounding the crisis, educating them about what is being done, in this case she says DCFS, but in the community and school to keep the client safe. So just talking about like what's being done, in terms of safety, because, kids feel like things are going to happen again. So they go, oh, well, that happened there, so that, this is going to happen here. And it could be anything, natural disasters, like with Katrina, things like that. So just establishing, this protection.
Yeah, right. And I think that's something that each family, too, is going to have their own unique ways with, and that may even become like a spiritual thing sometimes, right? Maybe that's going to be how a parent is going to help a kid feel a sense of safety if they have their belief systems. Or, like as you were saying that, I thought the answer here may be like, oh, well, now, there's always people who are working on this. Like, how can we keep making sure we can find these kinds of explosives, for instance? So now there's going to be researchers who are really going to be trying to figure out what's the new sensor we need to build, or, so that's almost that there's help on the way. I've heard that thing about responding to trauma victim is like, there's help on the way, and see already there's the people coming to help. And so that's a way, like, so there, this almost this feeling of lack of power, like, oh my gosh, someone can walk into a concert with something like that. And so, I don't know, maybe one version of a sense of safety would be, well, yeah, they keep working on security and they're going to keep working on it. So I don't know. Or just if it's about your belief systems and I don't know. I found myself even, I guess, kind of comforting my son in my own ways by just saying, well, maybe sometimes these things bring us all together more as a people, and they, help us, there are unhappy, upset people in the world, and maybe it helps us all look at that more, like trying to make sense of it in the big picture, even as it just feels so terrible and horrible as we think what it would be like to be there even, and just feeling the feelings of it. But that seems... It seems like a good next step to establish a sense of trust. And then also with ourselves, right? Like we have to find a way in our own heads as adults to make sense of it again and be like, okay, somehow I need to be able to go out into the world and maybe even still let my teenager go to a concert. Maybe some parents are going to decide it's just not safe to send your kids to a concert anymore. But a lot of parents are going to have to make sense for themselves and just be like, I'm still going to say yes when they ask if they can go to a concert, even though obviously now we know that's a possibility. So somehow you find your sense of safety, you talk yourself or your kids there in a way that makes sense for you. Well, yeah.
And I think understanding that these things, happen now, we have probably more security and safety than we've ever had.
Right.
And some people would probably argue at the cost of, our own rights and, privacy.
Yeah.
But, so one of the things she talks about is maintaining structure, stability, and predictability. So reestablish predictable routines, clear expectations, and consistent rules. So now, this is interesting because after 9/11, I know people, we were just terrorized. People were so afraid. And Cindy and I, we had a trip scheduled for San Francisco, and we were going to cancel. I think it was in November. I think we were going up for Thanksgiving or something of that nature. And we pushed through the fear, and God, did it take a long time to get through security. We couldn't even get near the airport. It was really a hassle, but it was an exercise in, maintaining this sort of structure of we have this scheduled, and, this is not going to happen here again in the same, you have to be able to at least try to go back to whatever your routine was, whether it's going to the gym, going back to school, going back to work. Yes, we all took time because we were devastated. We had not experienced that here in the States. But one of the things that we tell, and this is a way to protect, this is still under the protection mode, is not to replay. This is what happened with 9/11. We saw so many clips of the plane going into the towers. And, there's only so many times you can watch that. And so, kids, that are small have no concept of that. They're like, how many planes? We saw this over and over again. So it's re-traumatizing to say, to see the same video clip over and over. So it's good to take information in small pieces, turn off the TV, like you were saying, going over the video clips with your kids. But at some point, it's like, okay, have you seen the same clip half a dozen times already? It's probably not going to make you feel any better,
Yeah, and I'm even thinking how that's something for us to be aware of for ourselves as adults, too, because it's like we think we want to see these things, right? And maybe there's even some being brave or real to be willing to watch it and look at it or something. And I'm sure that there's some validity to that, but I'm almost thinking it's like, for some of us, it could be almost like how I see that thing where like the cutting phenomenon I hear, where you're almost doing that to feel your mortality, it almost seems like a way that we would do something that doesn't quite feel good, but it somehow is giving us this something, this satisfaction, that if anything, like a remembering of our mortality to watch the 9/11 video again and again, or the Ariana Grande videos. Yeah, so maybe just being clear with ourselves at what point is it helpful and at what point is it, I don't know, feeding something else that may not be, and that it is filling our consciousness. And then for sure with our kids, if we have that footage just rolling through, that seems,
and it's one of those
things. But then we don't always have control over what they're looking at online either. So that's where I felt like bringing that up with my son Zayden, because he, like you said, I was sitting there with him, and then he said, well, I see him kind of looking for the video because he kind of wants to see what he can see about it. And I'm with him, and I'm almost like, what would it be like to see video if someone had it in there? And then, so talking to him about that, that desire, I hear you, you kind of want to look, but then you have those images to deal with, and how's that going to make you feel? And is there some value to that? And at what point is it not helping us? So, interesting to feel out for ourselves. And then I guess our kids, especially if they have freedom on the technologies, and they're going to have to fill that out for themselves a little bit, but maybe we can just be ready to talk about it with them too, even just that. How's it going for you with seeing it in the news or the social media or, that's a whole nother experience with it, right? Sometimes they don't have a choice either of being exposed to it if they're on those platforms, or we don't, right? We might hear about it more than we wanted to. So
So she has a couple of sample questions, sample protect questions, she calls them, to understand what the student fears or worries about after a crisis. These questions may help to elicit their responses. And you have to remember now, could be something that actually happened in a school environment where they're at, or in a location where they're at. This is something that is not here, but the same questions may or may not apply. She asked the question, what's the most difficult thing to deal with right now? She has another question, are you worried about how you are reacting? And third, are you worried about your safety?
Great.
And then with the last one, she has around other children in school or at home, around adults in school, or around adults in your new home. So it can be, just kind of getting, again, kind of a gauge of where our children are. And then she says just to treat the children's fears and worries with respect, which we know, but, we don't want to say things like, well, you'll get over that, or it's just something that, we don't want to minimize anything that they're feeling. And so we just want to treat how they're feeling with respect.
Yeah. Yeah, and that to me, maybe a version of that could be, I don't know, if there's ways with ourselves or with our kids that we could do a little extra self-care, or just keeping in mind that we're like dealing with this, so to whether it's, or just even more, and especially if your kid seems like they're like more clingy, right? Or they're like looking for more ways to connect with you, or they're more emotional, or just to be ready to just see it as possibly related and just deal with it with love and gentleness and care.
Absolutely.
And even ourselves, right? If we're finding that we're feeling extra out of sorts right now or upset, that we can just kind of remember, like we're all kind of thinking about that and dealing with that right now. So like whatever we would do, acknowledging that we're dealing with something hard. So, or even, being willing to say, let's make it a family movie night out. If you could even do more fun things, right? To just fill up your well with more connecting at the very least, or things that kind of fill you all up. Oh, is it? Oh, goody. Connect. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So that goes with the connecting.
See,
okay.
You're right on track. So she says one of the most common reactions to trauma or fear is emotional and social isolation. It can occur automatically without a child or adult realizing that they are withdrawing from their teachers or peers. So the third objective of this PFA is to help students reestablish their normal social relationships. And this can be done, she says, by social workers and teachers and she has her little bullet points, but she says reach out and check in with students on a regular basis. So that's kind of what you were saying, we might have a special day with family, kind of get close again to, each other. Encourage interactions, activities, team projects with friends and teachers. She also has take students to meet school counselors, keep track and comment on what's going on in their lives, and share feedback from the teachers and adults. So it's exactly what you just said. It's about connecting and making sure that, we're with the people that give us support, that love us, that, have our best interests.
Yes, I love that. And that's beautiful that's all built in there, because if we're hearing it from her, makes it seem so clear and practical and just no nonsense to implement. But I love too how you could work with, like, really expand it too in those ways and personalize it. So, gosh. Okay, anything else from hers? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to, she has some sample questions, and these are questions that are, they're suggested questions. Again, not meant to be intrusive or probing, but gentle with inquiries of what others can do to help the client return to school, stay in school, or do well in school. So the questions might be, what can I do to help you right now? What can your teachers do to help? What can your friends do to help? And what can your family do to help? So it's about connecting, and anybody who, is working, anybody who comes in contact with our kids who has empathy for others and a genuine interest in, helping can connect. So it's not like this has to be a professional. This could be family and friends connecting with each other, community.
Great. That's so good. So good. And it's like, again, it seems so simple, but it's really good to be reminded, like just the simplicity of saying, can I help you in any ways? Could your friends be of any more? Like to just clearly ask that question for a kid or even for ourselves in various ways.
And I think, the part about kids isolating, again, we've talked about this before, it's kind of tough because, if they're teens, there's a certain amount of normal time that they spend by themselves. They're kind of, creating their own self. And, so it's sort of like, it's, again, checking in and being connected, but then not being overly, it's a fine dance that we're doing to allow them to become, young people, young adults, but not, overly so. But they still need to know that we're there, that we're, even though our teens will act like they're, they've got it all together. They, like you said, they're not going to tell you everything. They're still, in the in-between stage where, they're kind of like kids and they're kind of like young adults. So it's sort of tough to be in that middle ground with them.
Gosh, and even as you say that, the combo of being partly a kid and partly a young adult, doesn't that sound hard? So it gives me more compassion for the teens because they do get such a hard time from the world. And I think, to remember that they just are dealing with so many changes. But, I'd love to keep looking at that, like how to support, like, even what may be a normal emotional life for an adult or a teen that might include time in solitude or even a lot of time in solitude sometimes, right? It doesn't always mean something's going wrong. And for some of us, that's clearly a way to feel better, right? So that's where I've come because I feel like my kids are pretty steady in their mental health, I guess. I feel even more comfortable honoring when they really seem like they need their solitude to just don't see it as something going wrong, but to see like, they know they need that to like get centered and feel better. And I think that's such a strength when you know that about yourself, even, and so as an adult too, right? And especially as parents, we see how solitude can be so refreshing and centering and important, right? But to be aware of when it's all of a sudden become, a person who's on the verge of suicide, for example, because of their feelings. So I don't know. I just would love to keep looking at how a parent can do that dance as well as possible. I guess it's still, you can't be perfect, but it's it seems important to look at.
And I've just spoke about this with Cindy yesterday. I mean, it's tough because in terms of how we're all built differently, like sometimes as parents, we have this wonderful opportunity for our child and we go, oh, don't you want to go? Don't you want to go? Well, I just look, I know my daughter well enough to know that after all this time, she actually needs time to recharge, and which is how I am. I'm a people person. I love people. I love to be out with people. But unless I'm around a lot of, really high energy people or people that are kind of like me, I'm actually going to get drained. I'm not going to get recharged. And and the way I recharge is by being, by myself in a nice space and, reading and listening to music and that sort of stuff recharges me. Whereas Cindy's kind of the opposite. She can keep going and going and going, and she recharges, by, like, she's like a Energizer, battery. She kind of like charges by doing. And I kind of charge by being. So it's kind of like just kind of knowing that about ourselves and our kids, because we think that everybody's like us, but they're not. We're all built differently. So,
Right. Isn't that so interesting that a part of a more connected life in a family would actually be to honor that we're all so different? Connected doesn't mean alike, And actually a more connected approach is to say, is to really expect that we're all so different. And I feel like I'm always learning that even in marriage, the more that I just don't expect my husband to be like me, the better it goes. So, yeah. Now, is there anything else that you wanted to share from the woman? Her last name was Wong. What's her first name?
Yeah. I'm going to pull up her.
I had written Margaret, but I don't know if I got that right. Oh, Marlene Wong. Wong. Okay. And I know you said Marlene. Say her.
Yeah, it's Marlene with a double E. It's not E-N-E. So,
okay,
and,
cool.
So the next step. So there's only 5 steps. So the 4th step is what we were just talking about, modeling calm and optimistic behavior. Some times of crisis or disaster, children and adolescents, they watch adult reactions and they receive cues on how to confront adversity. So they actually look to us to see, how we respond. If we're catastrophizing, go, oh my God, this is horrible, I can't believe this happened, then our kids are going to respond in sort. And I'll give you an exact example from this morning that's not related to this, but, I told you I was running a little late and I didn't think I was going to be able to start at 2 o'clock exactly. And I started getting anxious. I'm like, I got to get dressed, I got to get ready. And, my dogs pick up on my energy so quick, they started barking because they're like, something's wrong, And so just like our children, the only thing is that our kids may not say anything. They may just take it all in, soak it all up. Whereas, my dogs are going to go barking because they feel the energy, they actually know something's wrong.
Important. Oh, my gosh, because I'm thinking how it may be even more traumatic for a kid to overhear their mom talking with her friends about how terrible the world is now, and these, you know what I mean? Like, actually hearing your parent talking about it to their friends could be even more traumatizing, right? Because now you're actually getting, like, beliefs about the world even more so. So I think we need to be so careful about our responses. But and on the other hand, my first thought when you said modeling calm, I was like, well, that's nice, but I think it's also okay if they were to see us cry about it, like that would be okay too, to show like it's okay to cry about this kind of thing too.
Empathy.
But then I think on the other hand, we got to watch, if we're popping off with our partner or and again, if we need to express those feelings, we can, but we probably should try not to do it around our kids, right? Because they don't want to hear us going on and on about our worst fears about the world and evil and good and, whatever. So, boy, I'm glad you bring that up.
That's exactly what we were talking about last week. There's so much in the news right now. There's so much going on, in all parts of the world. But there is so much just going on, and we really have to limit that. And maybe we do talk about it because maybe it's something very important in our family, maybe politics or religion or whatever they are. They may be very important, and it's okay to talk about them. But, maybe we only have a 30-minute discussion, It's not something that we just keep going over and over, and that's the thing about remaining calm. And there's a calm way to talk about anything, and I like the last part. The dogs are going to bark, just warning you. Let's see if she can go out the door and they will bark. Okay. So, so the last part is model calm and optimistic behavior. So, trying to see the beauty that's in the world and the wonderfulness that's in the world. And it's so amazing because it's really easy to focus on these horrible catastrophes. I mean, it really is. This is something that is just, it's tragic. It's just really, it's horrific. There's no words for it, really. But with all that being said, this is still a very beautiful place to live in the world. And you know what? And I remember a quote. It's really strange from when I was a teenager. I was in a youth group. Actually, it was part of the church, actually. And it was from, something that we were reading. And I don't know if you remember, but in the 70s, the Bee Gees were real popular. And I think it was Andy Gibb or something in it. And the quote was, the world is something, I might be missing it a little bit, the world is a horrible place, but I don't want to die. It's like there's so much beauty here, and there's so much good in humanity. And we always see that because when these things happen, people come out and you see all the goodness and all the good that is in people.
Right.
And, this is one person that did this. And, of course, it's horrific, you know. But, yeah, so she says
I like that.
maintain level emotions and reactions with, I'm just going to say, with our children. Stay in the middle, no highs or lows to help them achieve balance. Take constructive actions, assure that our children are safe. Simple actions can mean a lot to our children, such as having, she's talking about clients, a number where they can reach you at. At school, it may be engaging in a safety drill to remind them that they can do or stay safe, or planning projects that improve the physical or social climate of the school. We can do this at home, too. We can have safety plans and things like that, you know, in case of emergencies, people that we call, places that we go. Express positive thoughts for the future. And she gives an example. Recovery from this crisis may take some time, but we'll work on improving the conditions at your home or at your school every day, so whatever the situation may be. And then help students cope with day-to-day challenges by thinking out loud with them about ways they can solve their problems. So, again, it's about the connection and having that conversation with them.
And being present and available when they're ready to have that conversation with you, if you know, depending on their age, right? Because
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that seems just, also important to bring in, and I really like that because it gives us the solutions and really clear steps. So, we'll definitely make sure people can find the website for that rundown again, and that's so helpful. I really appreciate that.
So
anything else you want to say? Go ahead. There's one more. Oh, goody.
Teach. Yep. So teach, and she states it's important to help clients understand the range of normal stress reactions. So this is a task that, and she says social workers or school psychologists and school social workers can take on. These professionals can, and she says, teach the children, the family, and the volunteers about common physical, social, and cognitive reactions to crises or disasters. So in other words, kind of like kids, you know, if kids understand that this is a normal reaction to something that was very upsetting or traumatic, you know, that maybe I can't sleep or I can't eat or I'm having thoughts, it's really important to kind of know those symptoms. Teaching children, families, and volunteers, that children may have a bit more difficulty with learning after specific events. And she uses the example of an earthquake.
Right.
So here's where we come in. Teach children ways of coping, such as controlled breathing. So that's meditation, that's yoga, that's all the stuff that we've been talking about. Identifying coping skills, especially those that have worked in the past. So used to get back to school, to stay engaged in learning, and remain at home and develop new work skills that support different ways to express feelings and experiences. So I think just kind of identifying some of these things that may happen. So like you said, that if our kids are experiencing any of these things, they may be normal. But the thing to look out for, like we talked about, is, you know, if these things continue to happen or they have prolonged problems, you know what I'm saying? So, like, it's been 3 months, but they're still thinking about this, or they're still upset about it, or they still seem like there's a behavior change. I think that's the kind of stuff that we need to be aware and kind of be looking out for.
Right. And hopefully that's one of those things, too, where we can, like, trust our instincts with our feelings about what's happening with our kids. You know, like, again, maybe the more that we're feeling connected ourselves, the more we can trust our feelings. Like, if we sense something is wrong with our kids, we probably could listen to that. But then if we tend to always be looking for what's wrong with our kids, like we talked about last call, I think, then that's a different thing. So, but yeah, I think the intuitive approach. And then something you said also seemed important, too, with that last step, that as much as we don't want to be, like, catastrophizing it to our kids or dramatizing, or like really carrying on with our fears about it in front of our kids. On the other hand, to also share with them that it's very normal to be having some really strong feelings or even responses seems so important to be reminded of, So I'm thinking of like last night when I was talking about it with my son who's 12, that it felt good to me to express to him, like, yeah, God, it feels so terrible to me too. I mean, isn't that just so awful to imagine how that would feel, and I'm just even expressing, like, I can feel it in my body, like it makes my stomach in a knot, and to just, or even to, if the tears come through, and to just share that that's a normal response, so that, because I'm sure on the other hand, it could trip them out if they're like, does this not bother anybody else? Like, even if they're having, physical responses, or even, nightmares, or, all the things that might come up, right? Or just, like you said, having a harder time focusing in a learning moment, that all can be very normal, like, responses to something that is traumatic like this. And then I wanted to mention when you said the power of bringing in the, like, simple things like relaxing and breathing, I felt like that feels like a great, simple way to approach it for ourselves and for sure for our kids. Because I, too, noticed, like, there's a physical response, right, to all of us hearing this news. So even in the last 24 hours, probably most of us have actually gotten a little more physically uptight, and we can, like, feel it in our bodies, just the contracting, right? The contracting that goes on, and just processing that and feeling that and all the various levels wherever we're at in it. And so I, too, feel like, well, okay, then my yogi response is just to notice that, and then, sure, it feels appropriate to try just, okay, can I relax some of that away? Because I know that's not actually feeling good, and it's not helping me to hold that tension, right? So, that's where I would, like, just play with softening and relaxing and, sure, because obviously that goes along with holding our breath, right? The opposite of breathing fully. So when we get that fear and those feelings, we kind of get constricted with our breathing, which even is going to actually help us feel worse, right, and more shut down in our system. So, just the simplicity of when we notice we're feeling these sensations as part of this, to be willing to just relax a little bit more and let ourselves breathe a little bit more as a therapy, right, as just like a replenishing and just acknowledging, like, okay, we've all been through some trauma, and it's like the body even feels it, and the things that we're thinking are what's, it's all part of it. So, sure, kicking up those practices, and then just the simplest, right, of in the moment, trying out how much we can do that. And sure, I think, like you brought up, I think last week as well, if we could be teaching that to more of our kids and adults, I feel like we're all just learning it, but just to be able to do that, right, is a huge deal, to be able to relax and calm down in the moment. It's a really big deal. So anyways, we can keep teaching us all to do that. I'm all for. So, but that seems like part of the tuning into what's true, like this is traumatic for all of us. And again, like even just feeling the collective energy of it going on, to just know we are feeling each other's energy. Everybody's upset right now. Even the people who, there might be people who aren't upset, they're like mad that people are upset. There's all kinds of feelings that come up with this kind of thing. So yeah.
Well, there's a whole range. I mean, some people, and we become, a lot of people become kind of numb to it too, because we're just inundated with so much of it. It's like, oh my God, we just had something. How can I, deal with this now? So I think it's just becoming aware, like you said, of, our physical, emotional, cognitive, and even changes in our spiritual beliefs. Like, for some people, this can be very, like, how could, I'm just going to put this out there, how could God let this happen? How could, so somebody who's close to this or lost somebody in it or something, like, it can really change the way people feel or think about the world, their whole world system. So it's really important to kind of, and like you said also, people can take safety in that, in their belief, in their spiritual belief.
That is so important to bring up, because how much does that rock us when something in our reality really shakes our core beliefs, that's traumatic too, and not that it may not be growth producing or may actually grow our spiritual connection in the long run, right? Because it may become that reason to go deeper in your spiritual connection. But certainly just even having that feeling of questioning and even that moment of disconnect for yourself, if that's what it may feel like, is traumatic, right? To feel like, wait a minute, I thought the world was a good place, and so whether it's for a kid or an adult, or again, I'm sure the more like religious and spiritual your family is, it's interesting to make sense of these things, like, wait, I thought you said we're always being taken care of, how does that happen? So, yeah. Or it can go the other way where you might have a family that's just like, oh, there's, terrible people in the world, and, it can go so deep with how it can affect us, right? We've been affected.
Absolutely.
It's like, I remember the Alan Watts, who's one of my favorite original teachers on meditation and yoga and such. He would talk about, there's this maybe a classic Zen story of like the man who gets on the train is a different man by the time he gets off the train. Like just with one train ride, he even is transformed. So basically everything we're going through is changing us, right? So it's interesting to think how when these things happen, and maybe that's where we can see it as some helpful agent, right? If it becomes a trigger to help us heal some of our stuff as a society and, how we're being as nations, and, maybe there is some healing going on. I don't know, but it is affecting us, right? And it's something that we're working with, and especially in modern family life, because like you mentioned last week, I thought that was so fascinating that you were tuned into how the higher rates of child and teen depression and anxiety, and probably even suicide, I would guess, gets thrown in there, are probably related to just the access to the information that, our kids are dealing with. So I think that's just so important for us to remember that they're just in a different world than we were. And they're aware of the world way differently than we were. So
and most of the kids that we're talking about now are the millennial generation. Our kids are so, and they have very specific, they were raised on all this technology, whereas, we talked about that. We weren't, raised with all this technology. I actually had a kid, what did he say to me the other day? I think we were talking, oh my God. I mean, even 20-somethings, it's something. They were like, it was about TV or something. They go, oh, did they have TVs back then when you were? Oh, yeah, they had TVs. So, even the idea that, they really don't know everything, even though, they come off as very, worldly and proficient. And, they're still teens. They're still, young. And I think even this sort of thing, it's important for us to, to check in, to talk about. And I really like the idea of connection, and that's what we keep talking about. That's one of her steps: to listen, protect, connect, model calm and optimistic behavior, and teach. And so I think it's totally appropriate.
And you inspire me to see it as we as parents can see it as a teachable moment, right? At the very least, we have a teachable moment here, right? For us all, for ourselves and with our kids.
And like you say, our kids and my daughter's at the same age. She's been to concerts, and, this is definitely something that, is worth talking about, that's going to come up, that, we're probably going to, unfortunately, see more events. It's not going to, until we make the world a better place, which we do by, raising, children and families that have empathy and all those things that we talk about, it's like.
Oh, my gosh. I love that you bring that in. That's so beautiful that we could see, if we're worried about these kind of things, that our parenting like this and having a family life like this is part of how we can help, right? Is helping to create more individuals, ourselves and our kids, that are less likely to bring a bomb into an auditorium at the very least, right? And that are even ready to help create a more connected world, right? And that's how it's going to start, is in their family life that is about respect and honoring individuality and, right, gentleness and love and empathy and compassion. And that is that's so huge when you bring that up. That's a beautiful reason, like to say the very reason to do this kind of thing is because of these world events that are showing us, that there are humans that are so unhappy with how their lives have gone, how reality is for them, that they feel like they need to do this, like even for me, I like modeling to my kids, but I'm not saying the person who did, I'm more willing to look at even the person who brought that bomb in with compassion, like that, like, gosh, that person's really hurting, instead of that person's evil. Or, it just makes me even, tears come as I think about people being willing to do that, but it's more, again, of like a sadness, like, oh my gosh, wow, how upset are they that they're willing to do that, and that's worth listening to, and not just saying they're terrible and I wish they were dead, and I don't want to hear that, you know what I mean, even though I don't agree with the method. So I don't know, it's interesting to even model that to our children, that a compassion for even the perpetrator, right, in that they're even, if you're spiritual, they're even another child of God, right? And so, or a brother and a sister. And so that's, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty deep. That's a whole, I think, though, that you're on the right track with that, because I feel the same way. And as horrific as this is, my own spiritual beliefs, would hopefully be able to find a way to understand and, I don't know, find a way to heal from this. And I think the thing is that understanding, like you said, that how bad did this person feel? Because, my understanding, it was the suicide bomber, right? So, this is someone who, you were talking about suicide earlier, and this is somebody who,
right.
And the thing about all these things, the shootings, the bombings, all these things, there are warning signs, and she talks about that. So, when I give the website, you can go to the website, and, these things don't just, she has these myths about these sort of things that happen, and people don't just snap, and then one day they go, oh, I'm going to do this. No, this is something that's been thought about, that has been going on for a while, and so there are warning signs, and there are, things that we can look out for. So this is something that we can actually do something about. This person was apparently under surveillance. They knew about this person, so it's not, like they didn't. So I think... Yeah,
and I think that would be cool for us to get into even more in the future. Like, how can we just be aware of what to be aware of? Not in a fear-based way necessarily, but just in a loving, up-to-date way. Right? Like, what's the latest on
how... For
our
friends, for our family.
Exactly, and for our kids, right? Because, isn't that ironic? But I think and that's where I think it could be cool if you end up checking out that show, The 13 Reasons Why, and we can talk about that in the future. Oh, we're giving you Netflix homework. But it's,
I know, I haven't.
Because I've really realized it's interesting to look at the suicide thing, because that's really kind of our worst fear, right, as parents? Like, what's the worst possible thing that could go wrong, really, is for our kid to end up so unhappy that they would commit suicide. Like, that kind of is the worst possible thing, right, in the parenting realm. Like, that's the biggest thing we're trying to avoid is that. So that show is so interesting in that it deals with that, and various people have various feelings about the show, because, some people feel like it glorifies suicide, and I know my daughter even felt like the character was blaming everybody else for her suicide, and I think it's really interesting how it shows the ripple effect of people's actions, and I think that's important. But there's definitely a parenting thing going through the show of just these families that are pretty normal, functional families, but where there is a lot of disconnect even in the seemingly great relationships with parents and kids. So that, I think it'd be cool to hear what you think as you look at that, and then maybe we can revisit this. How do we, if we're concerned at all about keeping an eye on our teen and their mental health, and for sure, worst case scenario, his potential suicide, I think it'd be interesting to see what you think of this after watching the show, because throughout the 13 episodes, the parents are trying to help, even the guidance counselor totally trying to help, and he even becomes one of the people that she blames because of the way he responded. So it's pretty fascinating to look at, even though you may or may not like some of the concepts, that it brings up or whatever. But, and it does have some interesting things about being a teenager in today's modern world, and socially what may be going on that
so much
the kids
going
are
on,
dealing with.
And we haven't even touched that, but I'd like to go into that whole concept of bullying and cyberbullying, and there's just such a realm. I mean, we can talk about that at another show, but I think we definitely, I will definitely watch it. I'll do my my cognitive behavioral homework, and I will
You'll
watch
tell Cindy,
it.
we gotta binge watch this 13 Reasons Why.
Well,
She'll probably like it
put
too.
it off because, as a therapist, these things affect me, and but I have enough friends and family around me that have watched it that, I need to at least watch it and weigh in, So, I'll do that.
Yeah, and it's not that it's, because me too, I don't really watch things that I feel like are going to be,
it's relevant.
I'm conscious of what I watch, but I really did like what I got out of it. I didn't feel brought down by it. I felt more just like moved and just in a place of thoughtfulness, just really a lot of thought-provoking stuff. So anyway, whenever you feel like you're ready for it, we'll get back to it in a future episode. So, yay. Well, but I think I'm really so glad that we got to do this now and get this out for people who are, wondering, like, what could we do in a more connected approach, perhaps. And I think the best thing that maybe has been the most unexpected idea is more connecting ideas with your family, especially at times like this. More special outings, more cuddling and cozying and more special meals or whatever it is for you and your family. Like maybe do a little extra of that as we're all going through things like this in the world, right? I love that. It's like the icing on the cake idea.
Right.
That feels good.
I thought you would like the connect part, and it's really, I think usually we're a little bit more free-flowing, and today I think it was a little bit more, let me get through these bullet points. But I just think it's important to get the information out there, and then, but,
yep. I love that. It felt really responsible.
I feel like it was really relevant. I really love that you had that idea that we talk about this today, because it's important, and it's what's going on now in the world, and it's something that we kind of need to all be, it's exactly like the name, it's psychological first aid. It's something that we can all apply, and I think it's something that is definitely needed right now. So.
Yeah, and I think it goes perfectly with our choices, connection, and consequences, because obviously with various things we talked about, there's choices and but we make it about connection, and I think we gave a lot of good ideas on how to do that, and then the consequences that we're going for, if anything, if it's even just to support a supported child or a better feeling household, or just better feelings about the world even, or consequences here, right? So it's powerful, and I know you and I are just really so happy to do this just because we want to, and because this is so important to us, and just how we can help and let our creativity come through to help at this time, right? So, anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, I really don't. I just want to thank you again, because like I said, you have a way of, I really like our relationship of how we work with one another, and I really appreciate you bringing this up, and I was glad that I was able to it's interesting because I've had so much of this, like I tell you, I feel impacted. I have so much information, and I really don't, I would have never thought to share this today, unless you had prompted me. And then I, started thinking, and I go, wow, I saw this woman speak, and, she had really, it was a full workshop, and so
right.
I think
yeah.
it's so appropriate that
right.
you pull that out of me once again. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for that. And I think that's the universe at work. So
for sure, it's so great, because it's like you're such the perfect person to get to offer ideas to people at this time. And although I agree, if we hadn't already planned to do a call today, I maybe wouldn't have thought like, oh, let's you and I talk about this. And even for me to see like, oh, I do have an interest in sharing how I think we could be handling this. So it's satisfying to me to get to work with what's coming through. And yes, and I'm so thankful that we get to do this, and it just flows and is so easy and fun. And thank you to you who are listening for being up for listening to us. And I hope that you got at least a couple things that you'll get to add to your family life and even your choices yourself. Yes, and give us the website for Marlene Wong with the psychological first aid.
Yeah, so it's actually she just kind of expanded it, but it's the website is actually traumaawareschools.org, because she works. She worked predominantly with the schools, but
okay, trauma.
So it's aware
schools.org.
And if you just Google her name, stuff will come up.
Schools.com. Okay, and I'll put that in the YouTube link too, so people can find it.
Yeah, that'll be great, and then people can find the video. They can watch it. Absolutely.
Cool.
Yay.
All right. Well, thanks so much, George. Awesome as always. And
thank you, Lord Jane.
Okay. Then we'll sign off until next time, and thank you all for being with us. Adios and namaste.
Yeah. I'm going to sign off with peace and love.